Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the country. It's Mark from SolidCAM. We'll be starting our 30-minute free training session today. With me, as always, some people call him the Space Cowboy, some people call him the Gangster of Love, some people call Kevin Rankle. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing good. Hey, everyone.
I've been saving that one for a while. And if anyone knows what that's from, it's not a movie. This time, it's music. Not going to be the theme for this week, but I kind of like that one, so I held on to that one for a while. Actually, what we'll do today is a question from Friday. Someone was asking, and I don't remember who, about engraving. Yes, Scott. There you go. Scott knows that this is the Joker from Steve Miller Band. That's a deep cut for some people. Anyway, so engraving this week, and engraving inside SolidCAM actually benefits from a bit of that SolidWorks functionality I talked about on Friday. Now, you can do an on-the-fly engraving using SolidCAM engraving. There's a way to just kind of put in some text and then automatically generate the toolpath. But I think Kevin would agree, a lot of the engraving done inside SolidCAM can benefit from that SolidWorks functionality.
Yes, and as far as the associativity as well. So if that part number changes, your engraving for SolidCAM will also automatically change for you guys.
Exactly. Yeah. I actually I never thought of it that way, but this is just another type of geometry that can be associative. So let's talk about those on-the-fly kind of engraving first, and we can take a look at all the crazy stuff we've done on screen on here. So when we talk about engraving, you can do engraving with SolidWorks functionality. You can do SolidWorks text and all that, and you can pretty much use that anywhere in all of our toolpaths. It's basically just another form of geometry. But what we're specifically talking about today is the engraving toolpath itself. And the engraving is very similar to what we've seen with some other bare bones toolpaths. This is a type of profile. You get the same sort of functionality. The only difference here is that you're looking to do specifically engraving. So if you go to your level section, it's called engraving depth. And if you go to your technology section, you get a lot of minimal functionality here because you're really just doing something like, say, using the center of your tool to engrave some lettering. But even in that, there's some functionality, there's some options you can use. And one that I find very useful, again, with that whole idea of using SolidWorks, is you have the ability to go down to your multi-chain. So instead of trying to choose letter geometry as a series of chains, you can go to multi-chain, set a filter called text, and this multi-chain functionality exists for a lot of different things. You can do a lot of face selection, and then you get your internal loops, external loops. This is finding the edges of a surface. This is kind of like this right here. It's kind of a precursor to what we see now with the smart face options inside pocketing and 2D eye machining. But for engraving, we're looking to use text. So that same idea of grabbing one piece of geometry and then filtering that into what we need, this is what this basically does. I say I'm looking for text. I'll go to my text right here, and if I hover my mouse over there, it recognizes that as SolidWorks text. And once we do this, I'll show you how we actually generate SolidWorks text versus text inside SolidCAM. But basically, this is right here. It's a form of geometry that we know as text. You can see the little letter A next to my mouse. When I click on that, it grabs that entire sketch, recognizing that as all the text in that one sketch. When I click the green check mark, it translates that into chains, all the chains from those letters. So instead of trying to grab each one of those and each line and each letter E and all that, I just grabbed the text and it gave me all those different chains.
Hey, Mark, can we hop out of there? If you go back in there 1 second. Yep. This may get a little confusing, and this doesn't really matter for, go ahead and edit that sketch, or edit that, trying to get to where we can see the preview again. If you guys were watching there, it was showing that it looked like there was two different, yeah, that's right. Maybe you just go ahead and repick that geometry.
Yeah, we'll redo it.
Because this will actually get me thrown off every once in a while too. The show chain on working plane, something that they added in 2019, and some people love it, some people hate it. But you can see wherever Mark rotates that, it almost looks like there's two incidents of that regular engraving showing up right there. So if you guys want, you guys can turn that off with the show chain on working plane, and then you can also set that as your default too, so that will never show up ever again. So you don't have to toggle it on and off in your global settings. So sorry, I just want to show that.
No, it's a good point. I noticed that, but I always forget to mention that. It's exactly what you imagine it's for. It projects the chain to the tool plane, and that comes in handy when we were, didn't point it out when we were talking about it, but when you do chain selections using this window, you can go up and down in the Z direction. So you're just basically choosing a three-dimensional geometry. But if you're doing something like a profile or a pocket, you want to see what that looks like projected to the tool plane, because that's essentially what that toolpath is going to use it for. So that's the purpose of that. But it's exactly like Kevin says. Right now, we're not looking for that. We already have planar geometry, so we don't really need to see that. But that's exactly what that's for. So you can see that I chose text. It grabbed that entire line of text and turned all of that into geometry now that we can use in our toolpath. I'll go to Tool, click Select. And just like any other profile toolpath, I can choose whatever shape of tool I want. In this case, it just happens to be a really tiny ball mill. Levels, very similar to what we would do in profile. We would just grab, let's say, that face there, getting that associativity. And let's say we're going to use only maybe the first 2 thou. We're just going to kind of literally engrave it with just the first 2 thou of that tool. Under technology, you'll see a very bare bones version of the profile toolpath. So you have tool side, left, right, center. In this case, we'll do center. If we had block lettering, we can use fill area and then essentially do very similar to what we would do with a pocketing toolpath. You just choose hatch versus contour, and then you give it a step over. Now, usually when you're doing engraving, you're just kind of doing single line font. And we'll get into that once we actually generate the text. But the rest of this is, if you're going to do some step down, you can put on semi-finish. If you're going to just do it just straight up, you can do the floor finish, one-way zigzag. A lot of the similar control that you would see. If you're doing this on the OD of a part, under motion control, you would actually see, if you had a 4th axis post, the ability to do some 4th axis lettering, some projections there. But generally, this is very similar to profile.
And Mark, if you go back to the technology section for me, in there, for those of you guys that are doing engraving, there is a new feature since 2018 called V carving in there. This was suggested by you guys, and what this V carving will do is it will make a really clean cut V carve out. So if you're doing like any woodworking or anything along that lines, that V carving is available for you guys as well.
Okay, so let's take a look at if we were to do this with just SolidCAM itself. So in addition to the multi-chain, there is a text option. Now this is a possibility, but I would say the stuff I'm going to show you in a second is probably better, and I think Kevin would agree. It's better to use the SolidWorks functionality, not only because of that associativity, but generating text, location, text style, and shape. It's probably a little easier than doing it with just purely SolidCAM, because what we have to do here is we open up this little text window, like so, and you can generate whatever font you want. The one we usually recommend is the DPS Schrift, because that is a single line font. But to use this little text window, you're going to have to open a text box, and then in there, I'm not sure if the lettering is going to pop up.
Yeah, you made your text box really small. There it goes.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so we have to do it like that, and then you have to do that, and you have minimal control here, sort of thing. You have to kind of
and the reason why SolidCAM implemented this in there is not so much for you guys that are using SolidWorks, but for the people that are using Inventor with InventorCAM, because Inventor does not allow you to have a text like that as a sketch. So that we put that in there for our Inventor users that are not able to have that ability.
So basically you can see kind of there, I chose a reference point, and then I typed in the wording, and then it would just generate the toolpath, very similar to what we just saw. But like I said, I don't really think that one's as useful inside SolidCAM, but Kevin's correct. Inside InventorCAM, because you're relying on the Inventor associativity, it's not as easy to do text generation. So we gave you that option there. But inside SolidCAM, you have the integration with SolidWorks. So you can actually do something like this. You can just go to a flat face, right-click, open a sketch, and then use its version of the text box. So you can do, let's say, we'll call it test. There you go. You can uncheck this box, get into the font, and then get the same sort of control over the size of the font and the shape of the font. So in this case, we'll do DPS Shrift once again. Let's make this guy a little bigger. So we have text like that. You can align your text with a curve, very similar to what you see me do over here and over here, either along a curve or at an angle. So that makes it really easy to place your text the way you like it. And then various things like you can center your text, you can put them backwards if it's on, let's say, the inside of it's part of a mold or something, so it has to be on a reverse. Lots of different functionality that you get on the SolidWorks side of things. Makes it a lot easier. And then when you get inside SolidCAM, it's like Kevin mentioned up front, it's associative. So if there's something about the lettering where it needs to change, or maybe even you have some sort of formulation behind it so that it changes the part number or something based off of the date or something like that. A lot of that functionality comes into this very basic toolpath. In addition to regular planar engraving, like we've just done on that one over there, we have the ability to project it onto those shapes. And that's basically what I have going on over there. So let's take a look at some of these. This one right here, you can see that the toolpath has been projected onto that curved surface. So that gives us the added benefit of, even though we're using SolidWorks text, we don't actually need to do the SolidWorks projection, embossing, or anything like that. In fact, it's actually easier, in my opinion, to do engraving, leaving it as that text geometry. You can see that there is actually no projection there.
Plus, it makes it a whole lot easier for you guys that are, like when Mark did that sketch, he doesn't have to do a wrap or anything like that. So that sketch geometry, that's where SolidCAM handles it for you.
Yep. And to get it to do that for us is simply just up here in the left corner. It's either 2D engraving or 3D engraving. And as soon as you choose 3D, it asks you what you want to project your planar geometry onto. And I have it set to the target. So it's not even requiring me to choose a particular surface. If I just chose the target itself, target solid, it's just going to project it on there. So this kind of goes back to the HSS versus HSM discussion. If I need to target a particular surface, I would use HSS. If I need to just kind of do it overall, I can do HSM. Whereas here, it's the HSM side of things. I can just choose the solid, and then the projection of my toolpath happens on all the surfaces. Now this one kind of looks a little warped until I look at it from the top view. And then you can see that it actually is doing the projection of the toolpath. If I just go into my Solid Verifier real quick. Again, you can see some of those previous toolpaths up there where it actually projects it onto the curve there. If we look at it from this direction, and then we get a top view, we get our lettering from this direction, looks nice and clean. That was actually projected onto the solid itself. The toolpath has been draped. So it kind of looks a little, oh, what's the one I'm thinking of here? I'm not the art guy, but, damn it. Oh, I forget the name of the one with the melting clocks, but that's what that reminds me of right there. So engraving inside SolidCAM is that easy. It's just generating the 2D geometry like we have here, and then you just tell it where you'd like to project it to. Very useful for 3D, even more useful for a lot of our customers that do, like Kevin said, wrapping it around a cylinder. They're doing part numbers on some sort of cylindrical piece, like the shank of a tool or something like that. So any questions on engraving or text inside SolidWorks?
Now, the cool thing with the engraving too, if you guys are thinking of questions, is, you know, this doesn't have to be, what I'll usually do is just pick a spot drill and use a spot drill for engraving part numbers, but they also do, if you guys are doing a lot of part numbers, they do make a tool specifically just for engraving. And it's a little carbide tip insert that you can pull in and out. And if you guys are doing high volumes of engraving, that works very well.
So while we wait for any questions, I'm just going to go ahead and program that part there. You can see it defaults to the target. I chose my geometry that was already curved like that. Got my tool there. And I'm not sure if this is what Kevin was talking about. When you go to add tool, there actually is an engraving shape. So it's not exactly what you're talking about, is it, Kevin?
No,
But this
no,
is
I'm talking specific tool that you can buy.
So we'll just click on that one. You can see that it is basically just that sort of shape there. Levels. Well, in this case, I have a three-dimensional part. I'm projecting it in 3D. So my upper level, I'm just going to say this face here. And then lower level, I'm going to leave it as 0. But my engraving depth, I'm going to set it to 2000. And technology, we'll do center. Under the geometry tab, again, it's very similar to what you would see in inside profile, except that really the only thing I have control over here is if I'm going to do tool side, left, right, center. Just do a save and calculate on that, and you can see that it projected it onto that 3D face. And if we take a look at that inside Solid Verify, with my oversized tool.
Yeah, that tool is very wide angle.
Yeah. So let's switch it back to my little my tool 68 over there. Now there is a question from Scott. So is there a serialization function inside SolidCAM? This question has come up before, and I'm trying to remember exactly what our answer is. What do you think, Kevin?
And Scott, for your serialized, so let's say you have a part number and you want every part you want it to be increment. Every part that you run on the machine, you want that number to go up or down. Is that correct? Okay, so yes, that can be done. So in the engraving option, what we have done for customers is in the miscellaneous parameters, you can turn on your post writer would have to add this in there, but you can turn on your incremental engraving option. And so, you'll have a part number 1, and every time you go to run that part, that number keeps going up and up in value.
Yeah, I thought it was a post-related function.
Yep.
But yeah. So Jake has a question. Can you do engraving in 5-axis? Yes. Remember that engraving is just a type of profile toolpath. And if you remember from when we did HSS, there is a way to project a profile in 3D using HSS projection. So since HSS is basically 5-axis, you can do a 5-axis toolpath. You can do 5-axis engraving. Now, if you're just doing indexed work, then you might as well just use engraving on an index plane. You'll get the same functionality. You might even get better functionality because this is a toolpath geared towards engraving. But if you had to angle the tool while you're doing your engraving, then it becomes basically just any other 5-axis toolpath where you're following a specific chain. Now, I've never done it myself, but maybe Kevin can answer. Have we ever been able to choose the text using multi-chain in a 5-axis toolpath?
Yeah. So okay. Just to kind of show, I know you don't have a 5-axis post pulled up, but go ahead and open up HSS right now. And then what Mark would pick right here is instead of morph or anything like that, it's going to be projection. And this is going to do user defined. This is going to be exactly what the 3D engraving is doing for us. So basically, we want to project it. It's asking what surface do we want it to project to. So we could just click on the surfaces that we'd like it to project to. And then when Mark goes and grab that projection curve, he can do the multi-chain and grab that text as well. Now this is going to do the exact same thing as what the 3D engraving, but when you get into the 5-axis under the tool or the tool control in the 5-axis section, what you can do in there is you can tell it, well, maybe I want to, keep it concentric within, 45 degrees. So my tool, my 5-axis machine can actually rotate around within that 45 degrees cone angle. So to answer your question,
give it a try right
yes,
now. Let's
absolutely.
go in there. Let's go and change this to, I believe there is a 5-axis. Let's go with that one. So Jake's response is to mitigate crashes while using the engraving tool. So that, I mean, that's one of the main purposes of 5-axis would not only be the crazy shapes that some people have to do, but also it might just be a simple 3-axis part, but the reach of the tool, maybe it's a stubbier tool or something. So I could easily imagine that maybe we want to keep it, like Kevin said, keep it at 45 degrees from, let's say, the Z, let's say Z, but the Z axis. Okay, let's go to simultaneous 5-axis, and we'll do exactly what we just did. Because remember that 5-axis simultaneous is still basically HSS. So we'll do user defined, geometry. Let's just use those same faces that we used before. So those guys right there. We'll project it. We'll choose the, let's see, these should be the last ones I chose. Nope. Okay, we'll just reselect them. So multi-chain, because multi-chain is an option that exists anywhere you're choosing chain geometry. This is a option inside of this chain selection window, so you always have the same ability. Now the projection, we'll do it to the surface normal. So in this case, because it's 5-axis, this is going to take a new dimension, because now we will literally be able to go with the surface normal of some of these curved faces. Let's go tool, we'll select that same tool. So tool 68. Yeah, okay. The feed value. I don't know why it said the feed value should be positive.
Your retract feed.
That's a crazy feed value. Okay. Okay. So levels, we'll leave it at automatic. Center, perfect. Tool axis control. So here we go. So let's set this to something like tilt it around an axis by 45.
That'll increase your projection distance.
Yeah. Now this is going to come out to be a weird number. Usually when you do HSS projection or simultaneous 5-axis projection, you want your value to be a little closer. Your projection to be a little closer, because you're going to get some weird projections in that case. But let's set this to 1 inch. Let's see if that works. And we'll burn the last couple minutes of the of today's session trying to get this to calculate. But the answer is anything that you can do in let's say something like engraving, usually you can do in the parents version of the toolpath, because those are bare bones versions of a larger toolpath with more options. All right, so we have projection, and we're doing 5-axis, and you can see that if we do this, let's say that do this in HostCAD. And let's get a 3D of the tool. Not sure why the tool's not showing up. Let's do solid verify. I guess I didn't add a holder to this, but you can see there's the tool. Yep. And the tool is at 45 degrees.
And that's going to float between 0 and 45 degrees. Now with 5-axis, you know, with those tilt angles and all that stuff, the sky's the limit on what you guys can do in there, because we can kick that tool over all the way to 90 degrees, depending on what you guys are using for holder. Use your gouge protection to make sure we're not hitting the holder against the workpiece or shanking out against the workpiece. All that as well. So like I said, you can really fine tune the 5-axis to get a really short, stubby tool in there, or, you know, get into a very tight area, being able to rotate around your all 5 axes.
So I just want to add a holder so we can actually see something a little bit more than just that little skinny tool there. There it is. So perfect example of why we probably would want to use 5-axis, because that holder would probably collide with this wall over here unless we were cocked at 45 degrees. And the projection also matters as well. You can see that I changed it to project it in the Z direction rather than the surface normal, because when we projected it in the surface normal, these letters were collapsing because we were trying to get it to be at 45 degrees as well as projecting it in the surface normal. But once I do it in the Z direction, the lettering comes out a little more normal. And of course, I crashed into my part.
That's minor details. Jake is used to crashing his machine.
Well, to follow with what Jake was asking about, we would use 5-axis because of the fact that we want to make sure we don't crash into our part there. So in gouge check, I'm going to try and use the holder against some drive surfaces, which would probably be all these guys over here. And then we'll just tell it to tilt the tool in the case of a gouge. So you see there's some more tilting going on, some super massive tilting that's going to crash even more. I would probably change this so that I'm not tilting that much. I probably would change it to, let's say, I probably would use something like through a point if I'm trying to get it to really just be kind of centered or something. But with the 5-axis stuff, that's a whole other class.
Yep.
So
that's a couple
we'll address that.
there.
Yeah, yeah. But if you are interested in this window here, there is a playlist on our YouTube channel where I've done a video on each one of these options. You can see how each one of these works in 5-axis. But I think that's the end of today's class. So if you have any other questions, Kevin's going to put my email in the chat section. That's my direct email. So if you'd like to send me some questions, some topics, if you want to request your own personalized training, because remember, this is a free version of the training that we offer to the individual customer. So we would get into a go-to meeting with you live, so you on a phone, or if you have your own mic and speakers, you can talk to us directly live, and we would cover any kind of questions you have yourself. If you have parts that you need help with, the training is available, personalized to you. In addition to that, if you know anyone that can benefit from SolidCAM, give us the contact info, put them in contact with us, and then what we can do is we can get them to a demo. If it goes to a sale, you're entitled to a finder's fee related to that. Let me just see. Okay, so question for next time. Is there a way to adjust estimated runtime based on a reserve run? Okay, we'll save that question for the next time, Jake. And I guess Kevin will write that down. So topics, questions, send them to me using email. If you'd like your own personalized training, you can also email me as well. We will be continuing this at least for the end of the week, but if you guys are still interested in continuing this past this week, also send us an email and we can forward it to the bosses and we can say, hey, there's a demand, we can continue. In the meantime, stay safe, keep your family safe. We will talk to you tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern time for a repeat.
And one thing, we're not sidetracking the leftover questions from last Friday. Mark is going to be slacking off this coming Friday, so we will go back to addressing those questions. I think we have the underutilized portion was a big one that we'll probably spend majority of the time on Friday, but we'll have one of the best classes here since Mark has to.
Yeah, because Mark's not here. Yeah, best class ever.
There'll just be no movie trivia because we can do motorcycles and snowmobiles and motors trivia if you guys want.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Introduce Kevin with a rev or something like that.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we'll talk to you guys again.
All right. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.